Imagine waking up just as the first light of dawn breaks, but your legs refuse to support you. Your entire body is shivering with a deep, bone-chilling cold, even though the campfire right next to you is still radiating warmth. Your throat is raw, your stomach is cramping, and every time you try to lift your head, the world spins violently out of control. Out in the clearing, the rest of the tribe is hurriedly packing up their shelters and weapons. The great herds, your only source of survival, have begun their migration south. The surrounding resources are completely drained. If the tribe doesn't leave this very morning, they risk missing the hunting window for weeks, and starvation will threaten everyone. You lie there completely helpless. You have no idea you are fighting an infection. In this prehistoric world, no one knows that microscopic pathogens even exist. There are no pills, no doctors, and certainly no places called hospitals. But then, someone steps over, lifts your head, and presses a bowl of cool spring water to your parched lips. Someone else tosses fresh wood onto the embers to keep the warmth alive. And another person is patiently using a stone to crush meat and roots into a soft paste so you can swallow without chewing. In that moment, the most important question in human history isn't what herbal concoction they used to treat you. The much bigger question is, why did they decide not to leave you behind? Today, when one of us falls ill, the medical pipeline follows a clear clinical precision. You take your temperature, run blood tests, and get scans to identify the exact name of the pathogen, and then a doctor prescribes synthesized pills targeted to destroy it. We monitor recovery through digital data and charts. But our prehistoric ancestors lived in a completely different reality. They had no names for the vast majority of human illnesses, and they were blind to the existence of immune systems or bacteria. Yet, early humans were absolute masters of environmental observation. They possessed an incredible superpower pattern recognition. They might not have understood why someone was burning with a fever, but they recognized that a sick person had a much higher chance of survival if they were kept warm inside a shelter and constantly given fluids. They noticed that a swollen, foul-smelling wound could be soothed by applying a specific poultice of leaves. They observed that an individual too weak to chew rough, hard food could regain their strength if they were fed meals that had been mashed and cooked down. Prehistoric humans didn't need a biology lab to understand the deep mechanics of healing. When faced with a failing body, they didn't stand there asking, "What kind of bacterium is this?" Instead, the tribe's collective memory asked a much more pragmatic, survival-driven question. The last time this happened, what helped this body pull through? But how can modern scientists know for certain that early humans actually cared for one another? When we talk about early humans, we are painting a massive picture covering multiple species within the genus Homo, stretching from our earliest ancestors to Neanderthals and hunter-gatherer Homo sapiens across millions of years of history. There was never a single universal medical system applied across the board. The biggest challenge for archaeology is simple. The vast majority of human diseases dissolve into the dirt without leaving a trace. Malaria, the common cold, food poisoning, or severe respiratory infections that ravage soft tissue completely vanish when a body decomposes. Archaeology rarely finds a fever. The only things science can excavate are bones, teeth, and fossilized dental calculus. Because of this, our investigation into primitive medicine must shift its perspective. We can't just ask, what medicines did they swallow? Instead, we have to look at severely injured skeletons and ask a much sharper question. How many months or years did this person have to survive after a catastrophic event for their bones to show these signs of healing? And could they have possibly survived that long on their own? Remember, in a nomadic hunter-gatherer band, where constant movement is required for survival, caring for a sick or disabled individual wasn't just a moral gesture. It was a high-stakes evolutionary gamble for the entire group. A member who couldn't walk slowed the pace of the whole band. They could cause the tribe to arrive late to seasonal migration grounds, force them to camp in depleted territories, consume double the food when supplies were already scarce, and require healthy hunters to stay behind as guards. Carrying someone with a contagious infection even risked spreading death to the entire band. And yet, abandoning a sick person carried a devastating price tag of its own. In a group of only a few dozen individuals, leaving someone behind meant permanently losing a mother, a father, a child care provider, or an experienced hunter. More importantly, it meant losing an irreplaceable library of knowledge about underground water sources, drought-resistant plants, and animal migration patterns. Every time illness struck a camp, the tribe faced nature's most brutal test of cohesion, deciding just how much this individual mattered and how deeply they belonged to the group. As researchers trace these fossil clues across continents, they have uncovered 5 astonishing pieces of evidence, proving that medical care existed long before the dawn of civilization. The first piece of the puzzle takes us to the Dmanisi site in Georgia, dating back 1.77 million years. Their archaeologists unearthed the skull of a truly extraordinary human ancestor. While still alive, this individual had lost every single tooth in their mouth except one, and their jawbone had completely reabsorbed and healed over years before they died. This is the oldest and most severe case of chewing impairment ever recorded in the fossil record. Think about what that means. 1.77 million years ago in a wild landscape swarming with apex predators. How did an old toothless hominin survive? They couldn't chew tough meat, crack nuts, or process raw, fibrous root vegetables. While we can't definitively prove that others chewed their food for them, surviving for years without teeth proves that this group possessed flexible adaptive survival strategies. They likely mashed tough meat, pounded tubers with stone tools, or specifically selected nutrient-dense bone marrow to feed their elder. Modifying a group's behavior and diet to support a weakened member wasn't a privilege reserved for anatomically modern humans. It was deeply rooted in the bloodline of the genus Homo nearly 2 million years ago. The second piece of evidence shows us that healthcare wasn't always a split-second heroic act. Sometimes it was a quiet daily commitment of patience. Inside Shanidar Cave in Iraq, scientists excavated the skeleton of a Neanderthal man known as Shanidar, one who lived roughly 50,000 years ago. His medical chart is staggering on top of severe skull fractures that likely left him blind in one eye. His right arm had been shattered, withered, and amputated just above the elbow in his youth. His right leg was deformed, leaving him with a painful, pronounced limp. More recently, advanced diagnostics revealed he suffered from DYSH, a chronic degenerative bone disease that calcified his spine and ligaments, trapping his body in constant stiffness and pain. An individual carrying that much chronic trauma couldn't hunt. Large game couldn't carry heavy loads and struggled immensely to navigate rugged mountain terrain. Fossil bones can't tell us who guided him up steep slopes, who shared their hunted meat with him, or who gave him the warmest sleeping spot in the cave. But the very fact that Shanidar I survived into old age, reaching roughly 40 to 50 years old, an impressive lifespan for that era, proves that for Neanderthals, severe disability was not a death sentence. The care inside Shanidar Cave was made up of thousands of small, quiet adjustments made by his companions every single day for decades. The third piece of evidence reveals that the prehistoric medicine cabinet might be preserved right inside the human mouth. At El Cedrón Cave in Spain, scientists used ancient DNA analysis to scan the dental calculus, the hardened plaque scraping off the teeth of a Neanderthal. This plaque acts like a biochemical time capsule, sealing in microscopic samples of everything that entered that individual's mouth. The analysis showed this Neanderthal was suffering from 2 intense sources of pain: an acute pus-filled abscess in his jaw and a chronic intestinal parasite causing severe diarrhea. But when researchers looked closely at the trapped plant debris, they found traces of poplar bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, the biological precursor to modern aspirin. Even more astonishingly, they discovered the genetic signature of penicillium, the natural mold that produces the antibiotic penicillin. We must be cautious here. This doesn't mean Neanderthals understood modern biochemistry or the concept of antibiotics. They likely chewed poplar bark and moldy plant matter based on generations of empirical trial and error, knowing it soothed throbbing jaw pain and calmed a raging stomach. But it is enough to confirm that early humans didn't just look at plants as calories to fill their bellies. They knew how to tap into the natural world as a primitive pharmacy for self-medication. The fourth piece of evidence proves that physical pain was a problem they actively intervened in using specialized tools. In 1988, at the Villa Bruna site in northern Italy, archaeologists found the remains of a Homo sapiens who lived 14,000 years ago. When examining the third lower molar under a scanning electron microscope, they discovered a large cavity that had been treated in an extraordinary way. Inside the decayed hollow, the enamel and dentin were covered in microscopic striations running in a uniform direction. Practical reenactment tests confirmed that these scratches weren't caused by chewing hard food. They matched perfectly with the scraping action of a sharpened microflint tool. 14,000 years ago, someone deliberately inserted a tiny stone instrument deep into the patient's mouth, patiently scraping, prying, and scooping out the rotting infected tooth tissue. This represents a monumental cognitive leap. The patient endured excruciating pain without modern anesthesia or antiseptics to eliminate a long-term source of infection. The Villa Bruna tooth scraping shows that early humans were no longer passively waiting for pain to fade. They had begun to treat a specific physical ailment as a tangible object that could be repaired through skilled mechanical intervention. And the fifth piece of evidence highlights a major surgical operation that required years of dedicated post-operative nursing. In 2020, deep inside Liang Tebo Cave, in a remote limestone valley in Borneo, Indonesia, archaeologists made a discovery that rewrote medical history: the skeleton of a young individual who lived 31,000 years ago. Looking at the left leg, the lower third of the tibia and fibula had been cleanly and surgically severed. The cut was so precise that anatomists confirmed it was definitely not the result of a falling rock or an animal attack. It was a deliberate surgical amputation performed when this individual was just a child. What stunned the scientific community wasn't just the incision, but the dense remodeled bone growth that completely capped and healed over the severed ends. Bone reconstruction models prove that this child went on to live another 6 to 9 years after the major surgery. Think about the miracle of that survival. 31,000 years ago in a hot, humid tropical rainforest where bacteria thrive and even a minor scratch can lead to fatal septicemia. How did a hunter-gatherer band amputate a limb without the patient dying from blood loss or infection? They must have had a sophisticated understanding of how to control bleeding, how to wash the wound with clean water or botanical antiseptics, and likely applied anti-inflammatory tropical plants to the stump. But the surgery itself only took a few hours. Surviving the next 9 years was the true masterpiece. For the first few months of healing, a person missing a leg is completely immobilized. The band had to assign people to fetch water, feed them, keep them warm, manage personal hygiene, and protect them from predators. As that child grew into a young adult navigating the steep, jagged limestone terrain of Borneo, the entire group continued to support, carry, and protect them. The Liang Tebo amputation is the most powerful proof that complex surgical medicine and long-term nursing weren't byproducts of urban cities or agriculture. They were thriving in hunter-gatherer communities over 30,000 years ago. And this brings us to the most profound cognitive twist of our entire investigation. When searching for the origins of medicine, our minds naturally look for a physical object, a miraculous healing herb, a surgical flint blade, or the shadow of a legendary shaman. We mistakenly assume that medicine always begins with technology and chemical compounds. But the truth is, in the dawn of humanity, the vast majority of life-threatening illnesses like severe fevers, dehydrating diarrhea, respiratory infections, trauma, and minor infections were completely beyond the reach of a definitive cure by any tool early humans possessed. In those life-or-death moments, What determined whether a person lived or died wasn't a pill or a blade. It was whether their body was protected and supported long enough for their own internal immune system to win the battle against the pathogen. A prehistoric caregiver didn't need to know how to purge a virus from the blood. They practiced their medicine through simple foundational acts. When you were too exhausted to crawl to the stream, they brought sips of water to keep you from dying of dehydration. When violent chills racked your body in the freezing night, they gathered wood to keep the fire blazing until dawn. When your teeth ached too much to chew meat, they patiently pounded and boiled your food. When you collapsed by the trail, they stood guard with spears, refusing to let predators prey on the weak. That is why the greatest leap that gave birth to medicine didn't start with discovering a new chemical compound. It started the exact moment one human being looked at another who had fallen and decided, "I will not let you face death alone." The first medicine of humanity didn't grow from roots in the deep forest. The first medicine was another person. So looking at this from an evolutionary biology perspective, when collective care intervenes in an individual's life, how does that mechanism actually work? Imagine this process as a 6-step chain of care that helped the genus Homo survive nature's harshest filters. Step 1 is anomaly detection. A band member suddenly stops eating, stumbles, breathes heavily, burns with fever, or shows inflamed, discolored wounds. Early humans didn't need a clinical diagnosis. Basic social intuition told them this individual had fallen out of normal operational status. Step 2. Reducing physical load. The sick person was immediately stripped of demanding survival duties. They were allowed to rest in camp, exempted from hunting large game or carrying heavy loads, and if the group was forced to move, they were supported at a slower pace in the center of the formation, or carried on someone's back. Step 3 is active resource provisioning. Instead of the wild rule of forage for yourself or starve, healthy members voluntarily sacrificed part of their own energy and resources to bring water and calories to an individual who couldn't contribute. This represents a revolutionary energy shift in the natural world. Step 4 is external pre-digestion. Humans use stone tools to tenderize meat, smash bone marrow, or boil root vegetables until soft. Biologically speaking, caregivers were performing part of the mechanical digestion process outside the body, allowing the patient's weakened system to absorb calories with minimal metabolic effort. Step 5. Localized physical intervention. When an issue had a visible physical location, they applied direct first aid, washing mud from open wounds, squeezing out pus with sharp thorns, splinting broken bones with wood and vines, scraping rotting cavities, or amputating necrotic tissue that couldn't be saved. And step 6, the step that defined cultural evolution, is knowledge transmission. If a specific leaf reduced a fever or wound-washing technique prevented gangrene, that life-saving experience didn't die with the patient. It was remembered, packaged into stories told around the campfire, and passed down through generations as the tribe's oral medical manual. Humanity's evolutionary success didn't depend solely on the rugged biological resilience of a single individual. With the birth of social cooperation, we succeeded in creating a biological support machine, temporarily shifting part of the burden of keeping one body alive onto the shoulders and hands of the healthy bodies surrounding it. Understanding this chain of care allows us to look at prehistoric skeletons with a much deeper, more grounded perspective. It is very easy to look at the one-armed skeleton of Shanidar I or the healed amputated leg in Borneo and immediately exclaim, "This is absolute proof of universal prehistoric empathy and love." But science demands scientific rigor. A fossilized bone cannot tell us the exact emotional motives inside the mind of someone living tens of thousands of years ago. Maybe they provided care out of deep familial love. Maybe it was driven by binding kinship obligations. Maybe they hoped that if they ever fell ill, someone would save them in return. It is also entirely possible that the disabled individual still possessed incredible manual dexterity for crafting superior stone tools or served as a vital storyteller and spiritual guide for the group. Most likely, the real motivation was a complex tapestry of all those things, a blend of genuine human compassion and calculated group survival utility. Because of this, a healed bone cannot freeze and fossilize human romantic emotions. But what that healed bone does preserve with 100% certainty is time. For a shattered bone to knit back together, or an amputated stump to remodel and seal shut, a patient needs weeks, months, or even years without being eaten by predators, without dying of thirst, and without being abandoned in the wilderness. A healed bone fossilizes the time a community generously gave away, the time they paused their migration, the time they shared their food, and the time they patiently maintained a safe space. So a deeply vulnerable individual could retain a solid place within the community. Today, walk into an intensive care unit in a modern hospital, and you will be surrounded by miraculous technologies early humans could never have imagined. We have ventilators monitoring every lung expansion, dialysis machines, replacing kidney function, high-dose antibiotics, destroying bacteria at the molecular level, laser scalpels, slicing tissue with millimeter precision, and anesthesia, allowing humans to sleep painlessly through major surgeries. But strip away the gleaming chrome shells and digital monitors, and you will see a brilliant truth. The absolute core of modern medicine still operates on the exact same primitive behaviors that sprouted around campfires 2 million years ago. It is the act of bringing water to someone who cannot lift a cup. It is delivering nutrients into a body that can no longer chew or swallow. It is keeping a feverish, shivering body clean and wrapped in warm blankets. It is sitting patiently by a bedside, watching every shifting breath through the dark hours of the night. And above all, it is the fierce commitment that we will not let a weakened human being face the darkness alone when they can no longer protect themselves. Modern pharmaceuticals can destroy pathogens. Advanced machines can stitch up physical trauma. But human care and support is the magical bridge that carries a body across the dark abyss, from the moment it completely collapses to the day it can walk under the sun once again. Modern medicine is an extraordinary evolution of tools, but its spirit remains forever the triumphant song of primitive tribal care. Long before humanity learned to name a single disease on Earth, our ancestors understood a much deeper, more magnificent truth. When one body no longer has the strength to keep itself alive, the healthy bodies around it can step in and do it for them. The oldest medicine of humanity didn't grow from wild roots in the deep forest, nor was it hidden beneath cold stones. The first and greatest medicine was simply another person quietly sitting down by the campfire, handing you a bowl of water and making the unwavering decision that you still belonged to tomorrow.